to School Britannia, the podcast where two Aussies teach Brits their own history. This is my friend Ellie.
And this is my friend Claire.
Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Claire.
How are you?
I'm great. Did you enjoy our syphilis lecture the other day?
I did.
Oh my god.
It was fascinating. I had no idea what to expect. I thought it would be a lot more medical since it was the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But it was much more about literary representations of syphilis.
Yes, it was.
Which I had no idea about and is much more in my wheelhouse.
I kind of did, but
Cool.
in some weird... So there's this guy called the Earl of Rochester who wrote really dirty poetry.
Yeah, he did.
In the 18th century, I want to say. And he lost his nose to syphilis because he was always boning
Rochester.
many people. Some might say too many people, but I don't want to judge.
Don't be a fool, wrap your tool.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just the other day, the 8th of June, Robert Stevenson was born on that day. Not actually yesterday. He's from 1772.
Time is not linear.
No. But that's quite cool.
That's so exciting. Happy birthday, Big Daddy Stevenson.
Happy birthday, Big Daddy Stevenson. We love you.
How old is he?
Well, he was born in 1772, so I'm bad at maths.
Very old.
about 250.
Shit, I hope I do something that makes people remember my 250th birthday.
I know, pretty cool, eh?
I just hope that thing is not staying alive that long.
Oh god, that'd be awful.
So tedious.
No, definitely build a lighthouse instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get on that. So, Eleanor, I do believe you have a rather intriguing topic to tell me about today.
I have maybe a slightly controversial topic to talk about
Hit me with
today.
it.
So, my mum and dad are visiting the UK at the moment.
Yay.
And my grandmother, actually, who's 88, about to turn 89.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mither. And my auntie Merrin. Hi, Merrin.
Invasion of the Valleys.
Yeah, well, Ballyclimuses, Schroders. Actually, they all have different names. Healy's. It's many
Invasion
people.
of people related to
Yes.
Eleanor.
Invasion of people related to me. So it's amazing having them all here. But one thing they all have in common is the fact that they are not overly impressed by British bathrooms. I had to teach my grandma how to use in the UK, they have these weird, like, electric shower things where you have to, like, choose the heat and then the power of the spray, but then it's never very good.
Might just get a tap.
Just get a tap. I don't understand. And
but then all of their sinks, the taps are like separate hot and cold. You either have to scald yourself or freeze your fingers off.
It makes very little sense.
It seems really unhygienic.
Maybe you fill the sink. I think that's the idea, isn't it?
Also unhygienic though.
Not great.
Running water is more...
So obviously this is a thing we share, Claire, as Australians. We struggle with bathrooms.
I was really
in the
baffled
UK.
when I moved here.
And most of the bathrooms that I've had in the many places I've lived in the UK have been tiny. When I lived in Reading, our bathroom was like a bath corridor. It was so tiny.
Bath cupboard.
Oh.
My housemate used to live in a house where she literally had a cupboard for a shower. Like you
wow.
opened the cupboard and it was
Just a shower.
Just a shower, and there was a separate cupboard with the toilet.
Oh my god.
It was madness.
Yeah. I'm not I do like a big bathroom, I have to say. I'm obviously a terribly spoiled Australian.
We're
who grew
very
up
spoiled
in a
for
house.
space, yeah.
Yeah. So it's taken a while to get used to it. But, you know, I think I'm there now. Oh, the other weird thing is they don't have power points in their bathrooms.
I know,
which
it's
I'm
so
sure
odd.
it's very safe, I'm sure.
It just feels really patronising.
It does a bit, doesn't it?
And they don't have light switches. They often have the light string.
Yes,
like
the
you
light
turn the light
thing.
on with a string.
They don't
All the
trust
light
us.
switches on the outside?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, no wiring in the bathroom. And like I said, probably smart, but... So my dad made the comment that... So they went to Bath on their way up to Edinburgh. And my dad was like, well, the Romans had great baths. I don't understand what went wrong. Why are the bathrooms in the UK so crap now?
Bring back the Romans.
What have the Romans ever done for us? And Bath is beautiful. Have you been to Bath?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's gorgeous. So, archaeological evidence shows that the site of the Roman baths in Bath was originally a shrine made by the Britons to the goddess Sulis, which is quite cool.
Sulis.
So it's this like beautiful, massive bath. I think they had like a hot bath, a cold bath, a warm bath. Like they had the whole sitch. It's like really beautiful, stunning. Has a shrine in there as well to Sulis, this
You
goddess.
could not be fitting shrines in any British bathroom.
Fuck no. So it's real schmick. So I can understand why my dad was like, come on, guys.
The Romans showed you how. Where did you go wrong?
Yeah. But then I started reading about Roman bathrooms in the UK, and all of my initial assumptions and my dad's initial assumptions were turned on their heads.
No way!
Yes. So there's this place called Vercovicium, probably Vercovicium, along Hadrian's Wall. And it's now called Housestead's Roman Fort, and it's along Hadrian's Wall.
I've been there!
Fuck me!
That's the one bit I've been to!
Oh my God, Claire!
Yes.
So did you learn much about it when you were there?
No.
That's cool.
I had really bad food poisoning.
Oh, of course you did. Yes, we've done this. We've been there. All right. Yeah. Well, I can tell you a little bit about the bathroom there.
Please do.
Because it's gross. So it was built between AD 122 and 128. And Vercovicium, Vercovicium? That sounds right, doesn't it? Vercovicium.
I trust your Latin well beyond mine.
You shouldn't. It would have been home to 800 soldiers. And like you said, they were men from all corners of the earth. Yeah. So North Africa, the Middle East, Eastern and Western Europe, Central Asia. And they all pooped together in one communal toilet.
Like a single...
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
But like a communal room.
It was like a big room. And it had I think they've found archaeological evidence of this, which is why it's like a well-preserved toilet. So it's a big room with a big oak bench all the way around with all these holes in it, and you just shat. Oh, you did shat, but you sat your butt down and you just chatted about the business of the day while you pooped.
Empires who poop together stay together.
That's it. That was the theory. I know, it's so gross.
Yeah, I guess we think of, going to the toilet as something you do in private, but that's a cultural thing, not like an inherent human thing.
No, exactly. So the Romans, not so great.
Hilarious.
But definitely better than medieval Edinburgh. Let's jump forward in time. Do you know about the phrase Gardy-loo, Claire? Gardy-loo!
Oh God, I have heard this. Yeah, I've heard of the... Oh God.
Yeah. So if you ever go on a walking tour of Edinburgh...
As we have both done.
Someone will tell you about Gardy-loo, which is what people used to yell out their windows before they threw their chamber pot out into the street. So it comes from the French. Well, I found a few different accounts of what it's from, but the best one sounded like garde de l'eau, which means watch out for the water.
Yes, which is the story they always tell on the walking tours.
Well, no, but they've said garde l'eau, which means keep your water. Doesn't make it garde.
Sorry, that distinction is far too nuanced for
me.
But I see what you're saying. Yeah.
This translation
makes way more sense. Yeah. I thought you meant there was a whole different origin story.
No. So watch out for the water.
Yeah.
It was used by people in medieval Scotland to warn passers-by of waste about to be thrown from a window into the street below. It says the term was still in use as late as the 1930s and 40s, which is disturbing, when people had no indoor toilets. So the reason for this is that tenements in Scotland's capital, so I live in a tenement building, you live in a tenement building.
Indeed.
People still live in tenement buildings in Edinburgh, but now we have toilets.
Bless.
But in the 18th century, they could be as tall as 14 stories high and had no electricity, no running water, and no toilets inside or outside. So there were just no toilets even on your street.
Not even an outhouse?
Not even an outhouse.
Ugh.
So, you just pooped into your chamber pot and you chucked it out the window, yelling, Gardy-loo! And then everything drained down the closes off the spine of the Royal Mile and straight into the Nor Loch, which was also Edinburgh's delicious water source.
Oh my God!
Yummy.
No!
Pretty bad. This is cute.
So
in 1749, so that's a few years before Robert Burns was born, the Nastiness Act was passed. The Nastiness Act, which decreed waste could only be tossed between 10 p.m. when the bell struck at St. Giles and 7 a.m. the next morning.
Oh, well, that's polite.
And it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah,
just
currently the same
overnight,
rules.
because I guess only like people who don't mind being sprayed with shit are out between 10 and 7. So that was basically the toilet situation in medieval Britain. I mean, Edinburgh, I think, was slightly more extreme than London, just because the tenements were so high.
But at least you were on a hill and it did drain away. I guess in London we just sat
drinking
there.
water. Well, yeah, in London.
But
London's
yeah,
in a
then you
dip
drink
as
it.
well, so I bet it was...
Any wonder they were all dying all the time.
Yeah, I know.
So gross.
Very simple.
I know they didn't know at the time, but it seems obvious.
So that was the toilet sit, basically. Just shit in a bucket and toss it out your window. Delicious.
Elegant.
And then this guy called John Harrington came along. He was the godson of Queen Elizabeth I, but he'd been banished from court for telling risque stories. And
him and Rochester friends?
He's a bit before Rochester. Just a predecessor. He was exiled to Kelston near Bath. And maybe he saw the Roman baths and he thought, things could be so much better.
Damn Romans.
Because during his exile between 1584 and 91, he built himself a house and devised and installed the first flushing lavatory, which he named the Ajax.
Ooh.
It's a good name, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
So Elizabeth came and forgave him, and she visited his house in Kelston, and she used the loo. And she loved it. She was really into it. So she ordered one for herself. She had a flushing toilet, Queen Elizabeth. But no one else was into it. They all thought it was weird. They just kept using their chamber pots.
It is a big leap.
I guess so. Yeah, but it would have been so great. I don't understand. So it was almost 200 years later in 1775 that a flushing water closet was first patented by Alexander Cummings of London. And it was quite similar to Harrington's Ajax. So it took 200 years for someone to patent the invention.
Sometimes people are just too ahead of their time.
Totally. And then it took till 1848 for a Public Health Act to rule that every new house should have a water closet, privy or ash pit. So it took 250 years for Sir John Harrington's water closet to become universal. Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
So 1848 it took until people were like, yeah, you maybe have toilets.
They're handy. They seem useful. I want one.
We don't have to throw a poo into the street all the time. So funny. All right. So we need to briefly talk about Sir Joseph William Bazalgette.
Oh.
Do you know about this dude?
No.
He's like the hero of Victorian Britain.
Oh.
He's incredible. Like, forget people who invented trains and built bridges and whoever built the Titanic. I mean, obviously, whoever built the Titanic was not great. But,
choices.
You know, all these engineers, don't worry about them. So Joseph Bazalgette was like a sewerage engineer. He's way more important. So I don't know if he was like a plumbing engineer. He was that kind of dude.
Right.
Yeah.
What we would think of now as an engineer who deals with like sewage and stuff.
With poop. Yeah. A poop engineer.
I want business cards that say that.
So during the early 19th century, the River Thames was just an open sewer, much like the Norloch, which had disastrous consequences for public health, including like constant cholera epidemics. Just people were constantly getting cholera and dying.
Oh my God.
All the time. And probably so many other things. I just think cholera was like the main one that just kept popping up. Really bad. So people knew that that's what was happening. This guy called Dr. John Snow. Have you heard of him?
Yes, yeah.
Not Jon Snow.
This Jon Snow knows lots.
Yes, he's very interesting. There's a great episode about him on This Podcast Will Kill You.
Yes.
I think. Is
that
right?
Yeah, it is, because they talk about cholera and his impact on fixing the epidemic.
So he worked out that cholera was being spread by bad water, not by miasma or bad air. He worked out that in areas where the water was contaminated, people were getting cholera. So he's really, really important. So they knew that the water was bad, but they didn't really have much of a plan to fix it. They thought about modernising the sewage system from the 1700s onwards because London stank, but it just would have been so expensive. So they decided they were going to try in 1856, but then they decided not to because it was way too expensive. But then there was the Great Stink of 1858. Have you heard about that?
No.
They basically had to evacuate Parliament because London smelled so bad. I think it was a drought or something. So the water just went down. So low. It was hot. And it was just like a sludgy sewerage. The Thames was just disgusting.
Ew!
Yeah. So the parliamentarians were like, this is affecting us now.
We can.
We'll find the money. So they realised the urgency of the problem and they decided to create a modern sewage system. So, yeah, the Thames was basically just an open sewer. It had no fish, no wildlife, and was just a massive health hazard. So along came Joseph Bazalgette, the hero of the hour, and he made a proposal, which was to construct a network of 82 miles or 132 kilometres of enclosed underground brick main sewers to intercept the sewerage outflows. So he also had 1,100 miles or 1,800 kilometres of street sewers to intercept the raw sewerage. Oh. So that had just been flowing freely beforehand through the streets of London. So he had a plan. He knew that people were still going to chuck shit in the street, right? Yeah. So he was like, how do we divert that into the actual sewers? Sewers. So it was like a massive, massive undertaking. Yeah. But he managed to do it, and he completely modernised London's sewer system.
Good on him.
Good on you, Bazalgette. Smashed it.
Thank you.
Smash and cholera in the face. So then, after they created a sewage system, they were like, hey, we could have public toilets because we have sewers now. You know, people don't just have to shit in buckets.
You don't have to wait until you get home to pee all the time.
And for women especially, that was a real thing.
God, I never thought of that.
Yeah, it was really hard. So I think women were a bit anxious about using public toilets even for a while. But yeah, it's important to have them because men just pee in bushes.
That would have been such a shift in your, the way you lived your life if you could comfortably and safely pee in public when you go out.
Yeah, it would mean you could go further and do more, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's revolutionary. There's a whole article actually that I read that a lot of this is based on that you would love, Claire. It's called A Brief and Very British History of Workplace Bathrooms. Ooh. And it's about the crucial importance of access to safe, clean toilets in your workplace. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later because it really impacts your ability to work. So, when women first started coming into the workplace, there were no facilities for women or universities even. When we talked about the Edinburgh 7, the facilities they were talking about, we can't have you because we don't have women's bathrooms.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's a massive problem. Or even, have you seen Hidden Figures?
Yeah.
There's this amazing scene where they didn't have, because they had segregated bathrooms, which is fucking stupid. But anyway, the bathroom for black women was all the way
across
over the. So she had to run for half an hour or something to try and pee in her lunch break. It's ridiculous. It really affects your ability to work. Yeah, it's horrible. So yeah, they started building public toilets. They were beautifully appointed public pay toilets. So you did have to pay.
Because they're Victorians, so they were going to make them pretty.
Yeah.
I do find that weird that you have to pay to use public toilets here, in train stations and stuff.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
The bathrooms at Flinders Street are revolting, but at least I don't
have to pay. They fixed them since we've been gone. I haven't been there for a year or so. Yeah.
But at least you didn't have to pay to use them. No. I just think it's so gross to make people pay. It's ridiculous,
isn't it? And they're not even that great sometimes. If it was 20p and a really nice toilet, that might be okay. Yeah. But they're not that great. So yeah, they made these beautifully appointed public toilets. They had mahogany seats and 7-foot-high floor-length partitions. And in one case, goldfish in the cistern.
Shit!
Oh yeah. Fancy as fuck.
That's hilarious.
So yes, bathrooms are not like that in the UK anymore. No. They do have public bathrooms, but yeah, like Claire says, you often have to pay. Real. And they're definitely not as available as they are in Australia.
I'm glad you said that because I thought it was just a matter of me not knowing where to find them when I first moved here, but I really still feel like there's just not as many places to pee in public.
No, I don't think so. And I think maybe that's in Australia, you are really encouraged to be well hydrated because it's so hot all the time. If there weren't bathrooms, then people wouldn't be good. Yeah. It would be very bad. Whereas in the UK, you can kind of get away with not drinking as much water and not peeing as often because it's not as hot. So I did a little bit of research into the average size of a bathroom in the UK. So it's 8 foot by 6 foot. That's real small.
Yeah.
That's the average bathroom size in the UK.
Mine's only a little bit smaller than that. Mine's probably 6 foot by 6 foot.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And mine's a decent sized bathroom. Like, people comment on, oh, that's a good bathroom.
Yeah,
you
your
got
bathroom's
there.
quite big, and it's quite square.
Yeah.
Mine's probably like 10 feet by 3 feet? No, 10 feet by 4 feet.
Not even, no, you're 10 feet by 3 feet, but sure. It's so narrow.
It's a really narrow bathroom.
Yeah.
A lot of them are like that. A lot of them really are like bath corridors.
It's so like they've just stolen a little bit off the other bedroom.
Totally.
And they've tried to take as little as possible.
Yeah, that's it. I think they just don't, it's not a priority to have a big bathroom.
And I think it's the matter of like when things aren't purpose-built because they're such old buildings and all these things are retrofitted.
Yeah. I'll just finish with a little tidbit from a brief and very British history of workplace bathrooms. So in April of 2018, there was this revelation that Amazon workers in a British warehouse were urinating in bottles to avoid being punished for taking bathroom breaks.
Oh my God.
Isn't that fucked? So, yeah, the only toilets, according to a journalist who went undercover, this guy called James Bloodworth,
great name,
were like hundreds of feet away across the warehouse floor and down 4 flights of stairs.
Oh my God.
So you had to go on this massive walk to go pee, and people just didn't, they were worried they'd get in trouble for taking too long. And that has happened a lot. There've been more incidences of that. Like in 2009, workers at a meat packing factory in Lancashire complained to their union when they were asked to like clock out for bathroom breaks and then clock back in. So they weren't being paid. Yeah. It's like such an issue. Like access to bathrooms, not just in your home, but in your workplace, is just so crucial to you being able to live your life. I hadn't really thought about it till I started researching this. Like, I'm so grateful to have an indoor bathroom in my house and to not have to throw poo out the window. Yeah. And the bathrooms at my work are horrible, but that's okay. They're bathrooms. They're inside. I can go anytime I want.
They flush.
They flush. They do flush. Most of the time. They flush. And most of the time there's toilet paper. So, you know, it's great.
It's just so interesting that the British went from throwing their, like, waste out into the street and being so open about it and, like, regulating when you would do those things in law to, like, we don't talk about this. It's a private thing you do behind closed doors.
We're not Romans. We don't sit in the big room.
Yeah. We're not even going to pay you to do this on company time.
Totally.
Like, you have to, like,
You're
leave the building to go
pee.
pee. You have to go down, like, 4 flights of stairs. It's, like, such a huge cultural shift. It's like they put it behind doors and then decided to pretend no one pees anymore.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It is very interesting. So that is a brief history of British bathrooms.
Thank you. That was fascinating.
My pleasure.
I had no idea.
Yeah. What will you be telling me about today, Claire?
Well,
Yes.
Ellie.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you about the right to roam and the history of private land ownership in the UK.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah.
The right to pee to the right to roam.
Yes! So when you think Britain, you think lovely countryside and like rambling walks through fields of wildflowers.
It's true.
Right? You just think nature and green and all the things we don't have in Australia because it's hot all the time. So, long walks in nature haven't always been that simple.
No.
Post-industrial revolution, access to like wild, untamed nature has gotten harder and harder for most people living in the UK.
Okay.
And the Brits feel so strongly about that they decided to enshrine that access in law, but not until way later than I expected.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And that law is called the Countryside Rights of Way Act, colloquially known as the right to roam.
Woo!
Yeah. But to understand how we got here, we have to go back and look at the history of private land ownership, which starts with the enclosure system.
Oh, yeah.
We are back there.
Oh, I'm so ready for this.
I know, it was like a mere 2 episodes ago that I mentioned it. I didn't realize how often this would come up.
Yeah, I guess it's fundamental to so many things.
Yeah, I thought this would be like a snippet of looking at private land ownership and then jumping onto the right to roam. Turns out it's very largely about this. And it's a very involved topic that I got very interested in.
Did you go down a rabbit hole, an enclosures rabbit hole?
Yeah. So, pre-enclosure, which is pre-16th century.
1600s or 16th century?
Which one is which?
16th century would be the 1500s.
Yeah, so technically the enclosure started very late 1500s.
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
Also way earlier than I thought it was.
Yeah, me too.
a portion of land in each village was categorized as common or wasteland. And common land was under the control of the lord of the manor, but certain rights of access to that land were held by tenants of the manor, aka your average Joe in the village.
All right, great.
Yeah, so boss man owned it. Everyone else still had access rights to it.
Great.
So all of these rights have their own great names because English is a wonderfully expressive language. So there's the right to pasture or grazing your
I
livestock.
really thought you were going to say the right to party.
I mean, we reserve that on all land. The right to pannage, which is releasing pigs in the forest to forage. These are amazingly specific.
To snuffle about.
Yeah, eating chestnuts. Estivers, which is the right to take wood. Piscary, the right to fish. Turbery, the right to cut turf for fuel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's just some of them. Like, there's so many, and these have been going on for so long that they all have their own names.
Amazing.
Yeah, so everyone in the village
had the right
to these things. And they were regulated in terms of, like, how much you could take and at what times of the year and all these things. Yeah. And so the other big difference in land use at the time was in farming. So they used what was called the open field system, and the land was organized into like these large, narrow strips. And each tenant owned a few strips of land scattered around the manor.
Okay.
You didn't own like 3 fields together. You'd own like a couple of different strips around.
And you didn't own... Oh, you did own it? Or you used it? You rented it?
Yeah. It's complex. I don't quite understand it, to be honest. It got really involved. But I think some of them actually owned it. Some of them, it's like poorer peasants would just get to live on it in return for their labor. Okay. That's how the law, because like the lord of the manor owned most of it.
Like the feudal system.
Yeah, basically. It started off with that and then it got more codified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So, I mean, not cool.
No.
Bad.
Your understanding of it is cool. The system is not. So this facilitated common grazing and crop rotation, but it was very different to how we think of farming today. Like it looked like the land looked really different and it was practiced really differently. It's all involved. And I don't care that much about farming. So to give you an idea of how much land was accessible to the public, apparently at the beginning of the 18th century, so 1700s, it was 8 to 9 million acres, which is 25 to 30% of England.
Oh my God. Of England?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was common or wasteland.
Holy moly, that's heaps.
I know, it's mad.
Was it forests?
It was forests, it was heaths, it was moors, downs.
Stuff you couldn't farm very well.
Yeah. Usually it was like, oh, this isn't great for farming, but you can, let a pig graze here, or you can get mushrooms from here, or you can take wood from here.
Cool.
Yeah. So I know I mentioned this when I was talking about the Luddites, but it's really important, so I'm going to say it again. Access to common land wasn't just an existential debate about ownership. It had a really material impact on the livelihoods and incomes of lower-class rural families.
Yeah.
So historian Ruth Perry estimates that income from produce from common land could almost double the income of a rural labouring family.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So between fuel, corn gathered from gleaning, which is like letting your animals eat the waste corn after a harvest.
Gleaning.
It's called gleaning.
Oh my
Great.
goodness.
Like I said, everything has a name.
Yeah.
And milk and dairy products from just one cow. A family could add about £17 worth of value to their income.
Wow.
When a labourer at the time could expect to earn about £20 in a year.
Wow. So super valuable.
So valuable. And that's not just like modern estimations. There was an anti-enclosure pamphlet in 1785 entitled A Political Inquiry into the Consequences of Enclosing Wasteland. That claimed that women and children utilising their full rights on common land could contribute more to a family income than a man in full employment.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
And women weren't allowed to be employed in other fields at that time.
Yeah, there was very little employment options for women.
Yeah.
They were expected to do this work, and so were the children. And it was like hugely important to the culture and economy of rural life at the time. Like it was how everything worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, it all changed with the enclosures. So in the legal sense, enclosure involved the removal of communal rights, controls or ownership over a piece of land, and its conversion into a severalty, which I'm probably mispronouncing.
Sounds right.
It's okay, I'll never have to say it again. It means that the owner had sole control over the use of the land and access to it.
Okay.
Basically what we would call private property.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So the other important thing to note is that this is only in England and Wales.
Not Scotland.
No, in Scotland it was the clan system.
Okay.
And then when the enclosures started happening in earnest, it was the Highland clearances. Yes. So all the systems of the enclosures were kind of brought in through the Highland clearances. Yeah.
Gee, that must have been brutal.
Yeah, but they had, like, similar setups with the clan system of, like, shared communal land.
Kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So the enclosure movement began in the 17th century in earnest. And before that, it was done by, like, mutual agreement between landowners. So the stuff that kind of happened in the late 1500s was just landowners getting together and being like, let's enclose our village.
Okay.
And in the 17th century,
it became law?
It started to happen, like, as a serious nationwide discussion.
Okay.
And by the mid-18th century, enclosures were regulated by Parliament.
Wow.
Yes. And a separate act of Parliament was required for each village that wanted to enclose its land.
Shit, man.
Yeah. And they were becoming really popular. So between 1730 and 1740, there were 39 enclosure acts.
Wow.
But between 1770 and 1780, there were 660.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was most intense from 1795 to 1815. And of all the enclosure acts passed by Parliament in a 160-year period, half of them were passed in that 20 years.
Jesus Christ.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like, they were just like, shut it all up. Yeah.
Enclose.
In that time, so in that 20 years, 3 million acres or 5,000 miles of common land was enclosed, which is about 10% of England.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
God, that's so quick.
Yeah. They just suddenly were like, oh, this is great. Do it faster.
Oh no.
And it was helped because in either 1801 or 1845, I found conflicting reports. And I think the confusion is that there were 2 general enclosure acts passed in both 1801 and another one in 1845.
Okay, yeah.
And they did slightly different things. One of them enabled any village where 3/4 of the landowners agreed to enclose its land. And that sped up the process because it removed the need for a parliamentary act for every enclosure request.
Yeah.
But why enclosures?
Yes.
Why did we get so
Tell me,
obsessed,
what,
Ellie?
is it money?
Oh, I don't know. Could it be capitalism? It is a couple of different things. They all boil down to money. But developments in agricultural practices allowed for larger scale farming.
Draining the land.
Yes.
I know a bit about that.
Yeah, they did stuff like that.
Yeah,
They just invented tools that would allow you to, what's that thing? Plow stuff?
Wow.
Things like that
Oh,
on a bigger scale.
Uh-huh.
I know farming. There was also a population boom in Britain. And food shortages at the same time because of the war with France.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. So there was a desperate need for grain. So the government was behind this because they were like,
you've got to use every available bit of land.
Exactly. And then there was also a concern that with the population boom, the old system of common rights access wouldn't work when you had so many people trying to access common land.
The land wouldn't be able to sustain that many people. Yeah.
So it was seen as more economically efficient to consolidate land ownership.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also an increase in the power of the new landowning middle class, and they ensured that all the enclosure petitions succeeded.
Okay.
Because when you needed 3/4 of a village to agree, a lot of that 3/4 of the landowners were middle class people, and they were like, yeah, I want my private land. I don't want to be out,
sharing mushrooms.
Yeah, I don't want to have to go foraging for things. I have the means to pay for them, so I don't really care about my common rights access.
Yeah, right.
Who cares? So, because I love me a pros and cons list, here's a pros and cons list.
Yes!
Pros. More efficient farming of land, less labour needed for farm crops, lower risk of disease spreading between animals because they're all fenced off from each other. That's it.
What are the cons?
Well, cons. Eviction of farmers who failed to provide evidence of ownership to land that their family had farmed for generations.
Oh, wow. That sounds familiar.
Yep. Eviction of villagers who owned no land and had kept animals on common land.
Eviction?
Yep.
Jesus.
It's like, well,
you can't live here.
Yep. Poor farmers were allocated smaller, less productive plots of land, and they lost their land when businesses failed and were unable to compete with bigger farms. Dr. J.M. Neeson wrote a study of the enclosures, and it concluded that they destroyed a whole class, the English peasantry, and along with it, the social cement that bound the village together. Like, it just completely destroyed the way society had functioned until that point.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this, of course, all led to the migration of poor, unskilled workers to industrial cities to look for work, which is what we talked about in the Luddite Rebellion.
Yeah.
Except instead of the skilled people who were working in villages as, weavers and things, this was all the unskilled farm workers and labourers.
Well, unskilled only because there weren't any farms in the city.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry. Like, quote-unquote unskilled in the sense that they were doing a lot of manual labour.
Yeah.
And they had lost their means to self-sufficiency, and they had to accept low wages and poor working conditions in factories in these big industrial cities.
Ugh, what a bummer.
I know. And one of the hopes of the enclosure system had been that if you weren't sending your children all over the countryside to forage, you would send them to school. But instead, those children ended up working in horrific conditions in factories until child labour laws were passed 100 years later.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it'd be great. You can send your kids to school now. It's like,
we can't afford to send our kids to school.
You pushed us off the land, and we can't afford to send them to school, so now we send them to work. Yeah. The poet John Clare said enclosure...
I love John Clare.
I do not know him.
He's beautiful.
John Clare said of the enclosures, they, quote, came and trampled on the grave of labourers' rights and left the poor a slave. So they were just really bad for the majority of British people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
The upper class won. And they won because they had the political power to go to Parliament and push through these acts.
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were allowed to come and, say their piece and protest against them when the individual acts for each village were going through.
But no one listened.
Well, either no one, often no one listened, but also, when you're a poor villager who doesn't have the means to get to London and can't hire a legal representative and you don't know the language of Parliament,
In fact, it might have even been dialects back then. You might not even have spoken the language.
Absolutely, depending on where you were from. If you were from Cornwall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they just decimated them.
Wow. That's brutal.
Yeah, so that's the detailed story of the enclosures that we briefly mentioned in the Luddite Rebellion. So this brings us to the right to roam movement. Mm-hmm. So the enclosures didn't just rezone land as private, they literally fenced it off, and often with hedgerows. So it was physically inaccessible.
Hedgerows I thought were so pretty.
I know, and there they are, stopping you from getting to your common land that you have rights to. So there's actually two types of public access rights in Britain: footpaths and roaming rights.
Okay.
So a lot of enclosure orders actually preserved footpath easements because they were necessary for travel. So they'd make some land private, but they'd keep the public access to the footpath route. But the problem with footpaths is that they don't give you the right to roam freely over uncultivated spaces, and they make you confined to a particular defined right of way, and therefore travel only. You can't stop and have a picnic on a footpath.
Or camp.
Yes, or camp. And you can't pick up anything you see on the footpath, like mushrooms or wood or anything. You can walk along it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they were really crucial for getting from village to village. So they had to keep them. Footpaths often had more ancient origins, while roaming rights are a bit, I want to say newer, but this is in the context of old British history. So newer is 500 years old instead of 2,000 years old.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So the enclosure movement ends in the mid-19th century because it has enclosed everything. This was the time of Queen Victoria's reign, with her interest in Scotland and the outdoors and social reform. And this contributed to people's growing interest in rambling. So basically they were took away everyone's access to public land, shoved them into the cities, and then instantly everyone was like, hold on, I want to go outside.
I like walking.
Yeah. So a bunch of outdoor clubs and societies form, including the Common Open Spaces and Footpath Preservation Society in 1860, the Hayfield and Kinder Scout Ancient Footpath Association in 1876, the Manchester YMCA Rambling Club in 1895, and the Yorkshire Rambling Club in 1900.
Rambling.
Yeah, I know, it's such a great word.
Lovely. It's almost as good as tramping in New Zealand. That's a good one.
Tramping is a great word. So the Manchester YMCA Rambling Club and the Yorkshire Rambler Club still exist today.
Awesome.
Yep. So this all comes just after the Romantic movement, which I know you know way more about than I do, but is credited with changing attitudes towards nature and popularizing the idea of taking a walk through the countryside.
Huh. Good old wandering lonely as a cloud.
Yeah.
Etc.
The one thing I know. So during this all, in 1872, the world gets its first national park.
Where was it?
Yellowstone in the USA.
Oh,
yeah, it was the first one.
Go US.
Yeah. So I got a lot of this information from not a book, but a PDF that I downloaded.
That would have been a book.
Well, it was a article for the Georgetown Law Review.
Cool.
And it was talking about the fight for public access to land in Britain and how that could be used to try and do similar things in the US. Cool. And it talked about the fact that the US just has very little public access rights to land. Everything is so privatized, and that's part of the reason why their national park system started so early and got so much traction, because there was so little public access to anything like nature.
Right.
that when they did do it, everyone was like, shit, that's a great idea. But they had less of a tradition of it because it was a newer country.
Mm-hmm.
And
people had been sucking up land for farming and stuff.
Yeah, everyone was mostly interested in colonizing and owning everything and they didn't have the same kind of traditions.
Interesting.
So yeah, I thought that was...
very interesting.
But it also just highlighted the fact that common access to land is a deeply entrenched cultural thing in Britain.
For sure.
Yeah. So, things really kick it up a notch in 1884 when MP James Bryce, who is a mountain climber and president of the Alpine Club, introduced the first parliamentary bill for a right to roam.
Yeah.
And it fails.
James Bryce.
Sorry.
So ready to get behind him.
Yeah, I know. He seems cool. It was submitted again in 1908 and 1926, I think by different people, but it was defeated.
Big gaps in between.
Yeah. Well, there was, World War One.
Oh, yeah, they were busy.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was defeated every time. But rambling clubs start to get more serious, and they form a national organisation.
They get better boots.
Yeah.
They invent raincoats.
So it's called the Federation of Rambling Clubs.
Oh!
It starts in London in 1905.
Great.
Yeah. Then in the 1930s, there were proposals put forth to make Dovedale in the Peak District the first national park in the UK.
Cool.
Yeah. So the Depression had created mass unemployment, and for many people, the only release was to go out into the countryside for cheap and healthy exercise. And the Northern
It's a great
Moors...
side effect of the Depression.
Yeah, I know. Get out
the
amongst
only
nature.
good side effect of the Depression.
Yeah. But there was nowhere they could go because it was all private land.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, so the Northern Moors were strictly preserved for grouse shooting. Yes.
Walking is so much more important than grouse shooting.
I know, and grouse shooting for like a couple of rich guys who owned the land, not like public access grouse shooting.
What does a grouse look like again?
They're a wee bird.
A tall birdie.
Yeah, wee birds. And so this led to demands for access and protest meetings and stuff. But the first big moment in the movement for rambling rights is in 1932. This is like the moment when everyone like talks about.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. There was a mass trespass on Kinder Scout.
Whoa, is that in the Lake District?
Peak District.
Peak District.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, it's a great name.
Mass trespass on Kinder Scout.
So Kinder Scout is the highest point in the Peak District, and the trespassers decided to get some civil disobedience on.
Woo.
And they thought it'd be the best way to protest their exclusion from what they called some of the best countryside England has to offer.
Aw, wonderful.
Yeah. It was organised by political and conservation activist Benny Rotham of the Young Communist League of Manchester.
Of course it was Benny.
Benny.
Smashed it, Benny.
Yeah. Well, apparently Benny and some of his mates had tried to go walking in the area previously, but they were chased off by gamekeepers. And he was like, nah,
come on,
this
guys.
is not on.
Yeah.
And he was like, if there's tons of us, they can't chase us away.
Yes. We'll act like grouse.
We just cover ourselves in feathers. Yeah. And he was right. The police tried to prevent it happening, but it went ahead thanks to like heaps of publicity. And also because trespassing wasn't illegal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at this time, trespassing wasn't illegal on private property. Yep, they just relied on social convention and gamekeepers with guns to
on
keep
the politeness of the British people.
Yeah. Yep. So on the 24th of April, they organised 3 groups to approach Kinder Scout from different directions at the same time. And there was 400 people in the main group, and they were confronted by the landowner's gamekeepers. And a violent scuffle ensued. No details on who threw the first punch, but...
There were no guns involved, though.
No, it was just called a violent scuffle. As far as I can tell,
on Kinder Scout.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, there were no serious injuries because they all made it to the top.
Great.
And they hold a victory meeting up there.
Oh.
Which I have a great photo of.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. But when they all come down, 5 men are arrested for their involvement in the scuffle. And they serve jail time. Wow. I think only a couple months each, but yeah.
Still.
And this protest marks the beginning of a media campaign by the Ramblers Association. They're like, nah, we want access to the land and we're going to make it happen.
Amazing.
Yeah, so in 1939, the Mountain Access Bill was passed, and the Ramblers Association and many other walkers were unimpressed with it.
Okay.
They were like, this is shit.
Was it just for mountains?
Yeah, so instead of opening up mountains for free roaming, the bill just created like a bunch of bureaucracy for like the issuance of an access order for a particular area. Oh. And it would mean making an application to the Ministry for Agriculture.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and then you had to pay heaps of fees to cover the cost of the application. No. And even then they were often rejected.
Yeah, no.
And even if they were granted, they came with heaps of restrictions.
Sounds shit.
Yeah. So they were super unimpressed. But then World War II happened. So slight pause.
Okay.
But then after that, there were lots more positive changes.
Everyone came back and they're like, we need a war.
Yes. I need to go somewhere quiet. I have severe PTSD. Please let me lie down in a meadow. Yeah. So in 1949, Parliament passed the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act.
Aww.
And this act mapped out and legitimised all of the footpaths around the country.
Good start. And weren't they already okay, though?
They were, but they, instead of it just being a agreed upon thing in each village, they made it a nationally mapped network of footpaths that was enshrined in, instead of a local law, in, federal law.
Great.
And most importantly, set up a system for determining what was a public right in the context of, land access.
Okay.
Yeah. So the NPACA also created the concept of designated open country.
Hang on, what's the NPACA?
This is the shortened name of this act.
I see.
Yes, the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act.
Fabulous. Okay, I'm with you.
So this idea of open country was where access agreements were negotiated with landowners. Mm-hmm. So, but this attempt at public roaming rights also failed.
Oh, God.
Yes. The process for granting roaming rights under this act was another bureaucratic quagmire that involved...
Ironic, because they're trying to get access to quagmires.
Yes! You should wade through a red tape quagmire to get to a physical quagmire.
Desired quagmire.
So you had to... the request had to be made formally by the county council of the area you were trying to get access to.
Right.
But those councils were all dominated by local landowners.
No.
Who were just obviously no. So only 2 right to roam access orders were issued under this act.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in 1951, we get the creation of the UK's first national park, the Peak District National Park, and the first access agreements in the country for the public to walk on private moorland.
Amazing.
Yes. So over the next couple of decades, the national park system really amps up and they start adding more and more parks. But access to...
Are you telling me that scene in Pride and Prejudice where Lizzie goes to the Peak District and she climbs up the hill would never have happened because she wouldn't have had access?
It would have, because access at that point was granted based on, social status. So you know how she goes to old mate's house and sees him jump into the lake, because that definitely happened and was fact.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
She was allowed to do that because she had the right kind of social standing where she could request access to the property. Because, they get shown around the house and stuff.
Yeah, but there's a bit where she, climbs a hill.
Because they would have had access to the rest of his property and permission to be on it because they're the right kind of people.
I see.
Yes.
She had a pretty dress so she could climb the hill.
Yeah, so that land would have been privately owned and she would have to have had permission from the landowner to be on it.
That's correct.
But that scene where she walks through a field to get to another field house, that was her on a publicly accessible footpath.
Okay.
That
all right.
anyone had access to.
All right. Okay, I'm with you.
But it would have been across private land.
Yes, on a public footpath.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, but good point. So, over the next couple of decades, the national park system really amps up and they start adding more and more parks, but access to land is still restricted to designated parks and footpaths. By the 1990s, we're really just going to skip the whole start of that decade because no one really does anything. But interest in right to roam really heats up, and the Ramblers' rights groups start staging mass occupations of countryside areas, which I find no details on, but sound really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in 1994, the Labour Party, then out of power, made the public right of access part of its platform in its annual conference.
Awesome.
And not based on this, but with this as part of their platform, they get voted into power in 1997.
I really like to think that was the only reason.
The tipping point. So, of course, they start by issuing a consultation paper, because that's how you do these things. And there was propositions that roamers should have to buy an annual pass, and that would cover compensation for landowners to build additional infrastructure to deal with the public. Was more about adding kissing gates and stiles
so the sheepies couldn't get out.
Yeah. But that was very quickly dismissed as not being at all in the spirit of right to roam.
Nah.
There was also considered a voluntary scheme with a stick and carrot approach, but that was also dismissed. And in the end, Parliament was convinced that the public benefit from opening up access to these lands far outweighed the additional burden on the landowners.
Yay!
Yeah, and they settled on new statutory rights of access to the open countryside, coupled with restrictions to protect landowners' interests.
Great.
So there wouldn't be any compensation for landowners, but local authorities would help with the cost of access, and landowner liability for any injuries would be really limited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So if your kid falls in a pond, it's their own damn fault.
Yeah.
And then in 2000, the Countryside and Rights of Way Act was passed.
Whoa!
Finally granting the right to roam in England and Wales.
That's wonderful.
Yay.
Yay.
It is shortened to Crow. Which is great.
Appropriate.
Yes. The Land Reform Act of 2003, which didn't come into effect until 2005, provided similar access to land for people in Scotland.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
So under Crow, the public has the right to wander over registered common land and lands classified as open country, consisting of mountain, moorland, heath and downland. So all the places that would have had common rights to before the enclosures.
Back where we started.
Yeah. Land accessible under this act comprises of about 12% of England and Wales.
Oh.
Yeah, so
not
not all
bad.
of it, but some of it.
Yeah.
Unlike the common rights of old, though, you only have access to this land for the purpose of open-air recreation.
Not picking mushrooms.
No.
Or firewood.
Yeah, you specifically can't hunt, light a fire, swim in non-tidal waters, remove plants or trees, ride a bicycle or horse, or disrupt lawful activities on the land.
People ride bikes.
Like mountain
On
biking
mountains,
and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, but they're designated areas where it's okay,
alright.
and then you can't just do it anywhere.
Okay.
You can be banned from common land for 72 hours for breaching the rules.
Oh, wow.
That's the
just
punishment.
72 hours.
Yeah,
Aw.
it's so cute.
Seems worth it to have a little fire.
Yeah. Just swim in a nice pond. So that's where we ended up with the right to roam, which we now have.
Yeah.
And you can go a-wandering in the right places.
Can go a roaming in the gloaming.
Yeah.
Yay.
But the current status of private land ownership is quite interesting.
Okay.
And it's actually how I got here.
Give it to me.
Yes. So I added this to my list of things I wanted to talk about when I saw a very salacious Guardian headline back in April that said half of England is owned by less than 1% of the population.
Not surprising.
Yeah. So turns out it's very hard to find out who owns what.
Oh.
Yeah. I know. I thought it would be really easy. TV has made me believe you just go down to your local records office and you find a deed and then you're like, cool, this is owned by this person. Not so. It's apparently shrouded in mystery. So this article was like mostly basically selling a book some dude had written.
Oh, yeah.
But it all seems pretty above board. And it's suggested, because they can't find all the information because it's so hard to access it, but they think that about 25,000 landowners, typically members of the aristocracy and corporations, own most of the land in the UK.
Jesus.
Yeah. So major owners include the Duke of Buccleuch.
Duke of Buccleuch.
Duke of Buccleuch.
Yeah.
I always do this.
It's really hard, that one. He also owns some paintings in the National Gallery's
There you go.
collection. Duke of Buccleuch.
Yes.
A Da Vinci, in fact.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Well, any wonder he owns enough land to afford such things. The Queen is another big owner. Several large grouse moor estates. And
Is it the grouse?
The grouse themselves, yes,
Gee,
collectively
I knew it.
own.
Their feathers are way too shiny to just be cheap feathers.
Sitting on gold.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneur James Dyson.
Who's James Dyson?
I assume of vacuuming fame, but I didn't want to confirm or deny because I just like to imagine that
I really hope
Hoover's
that's
made
right.
him rich enough to buy all the land. Homeowners, like run-of-the-mill, own your own home people, own 5% of the land in the UK.
I met some last night. They
Homeowners.
owned a home.
Good on
It was
them.
amazing.
They own very little of this country.
But they're painting their door yellow, so that's nice,
fine.
isn't it?
I mean, good on them, because it's damn hard to own property in this world. The owners of 17% of England and Wales remain undeclared on the land registry and are most likely owned by aristocrats because properties have been in their families for so long they've never been sold on the open market, so you can't trace who owns them.
God.
I know. It's 17%.
That's so much.
It's insane. And 18% of England is owned by corporations, most of it based in like offshore jurisdictions. Yeah. The royal family owns about 1.4% of England.
It's a decent chunk.
Yeah. And when I was reading this, I came across a similar article about the state of land ownership in Scotland. It was written like a month earlier that wasn't selling a book. But surprise, surprise, similar situation.
Yeah.
Scottish Land Commission was set up to investigate the use of land in the UK, the use of land in Scotland. And they found that about 1,125 people, or owners, including Highland Lairds and major public bodies such as Forest Enterprise and the National Trust for Scotland, own 70% of Scotland's rural land.
Wow.
Yeah. That includes 87 owners whose holdings total 1.7 million hectares. with some estates owned by the same family for more than 400 years.
Yeah.
Scotland's two most powerful private landowners, the Danish clothing billionaire Anders Holt Poulsen and his wife Anne, and the Duke of Buccleuch, each own more than 80,000 hectares spread across multiple properties.
God.
Yeah, and the Church of England has quietly become Scotland's largest private forestry owner.
What? That's weird.
Just investing. Just buying up forestry.
Church shouldn't be investing in things?
Yeah.
Feels weird, doesn't it?
But they do, because they're all sneaky, and none of them pay fucking taxes, because they're charities.
Blech.
Yep. So this commission, the Scottish Land Commission, called this monopoly socially corrosive.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yep. So in conclusion, eat the rich and get back your common land rights.
Go for a roll.
So, if you want to hear more history tidbits, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please, please rate, review, subscribe so that other history buffs can find us.
That was beautiful. If you want to know what sources we used, please go to our SoundCloud page. The link is in the description.
Today's homework is go for a ramble.